Hey ho, internet, it's J-Funk again. Today I'm going to do a Necrotic Wake overview, as well as previewing Night Fae Windwalker. Necrotic Wake is like probably my second favorite dungeon that's currently available right now. It's very cool, but it has some things. Now on your screen you're going to see a map. And the reason why I'm showing the map here is that there are 4 different items in this dungeon that you can utilize throughout the dungeon. They are quite similar to Zap Bots from JUNKYARD, where the items do scale. The items and the damage that they do scale with key level. Now I'm going to go over what each of those items do, but I kind of wanted to just display a map to show where you can find these items in the dungeon, roughly. So let me go through these items. The first one is the Forgotten Forge Hammer. The Forgotten Forge Hammer, you can pick it up, and when you do, it will stun a target. It will do a large amount of physical damage to that one target. So right now, I think on a 12 or so, it hit for 25k, can crit for 50k, and it stuns the target for 8 seconds. Now, a few notes about the stun. You cannot stun targets that are CC immune, but if you were to CC or stun a target and then you use the hammer on it, the hammer does not get DR'd. So it'll always be an 8-second stun. Secondly, we have the Bloody Javelin. Now the Bloody Javelin will, you target an enemy, and you throw the javelin, it will damage all enemies between you and that target and deal damage to each of those enemies. A large amount of initial damage as well as a dot damage, and then also cause those enemies to take 20% increased damage for 16 seconds. Next up would be the Discharged Anima. There are only 2 of these throughout the dungeon, but they are extraordinarily powerful if you can manage to use them in an effective manner. Right now, the Discharged Anima will, when you use it, it does pulsing arcane damage to all nearby enemies and interrupts any spell casts that happen during that time as well. These can be very, very powerful, and very often you'll see it'll end up being your top damage in that dungeon. Very, very good. And lastly, we have the Discarded Shield. Now, I think the Discarded Shield may have some undiscovered potential, but right now it seems like on the beta to be the weakest of all these items, because what happens is you pick up the shield and you can activate it, which will reduce the damage taken by all nearby allies within 8 yards for 6 seconds, but the target who uses it has to channel the shield, much like Cathedral of the Eternal Night, where you just have to sit there and channel. You are pacified and can't really do much while you're channeling that shield. So we might see some use for this later, but from testing, we didn't really utilize it very much, so take that as you will. It's important to note that all these items, when you pick them up, you can use them, or you can hold on to them for later in the dungeon, but if you die, you drop the item, losing it entirely. So there's a kind of a risk reward there, where maybe you want to use it for later in the dungeon, like the 3rd boss room, but you will not be able to if you die with it. So you got to be careful here. You can backtrack after the 2nd boss and pick these items up if you want, but that'd be a lot of backtracking that may or may not be worth it. So without further ado, let's get into the dungeon. Alright, so we're in Necrotic Wake. You first start off in Necrotic Wake. We're going to pull all these mobs here. I'm going to try to explain as we go along what these mobs are doing. So the gatekeeper here we're going to pull is going to cast Necrotic Bolt. Necrotic Bolt is a pretty common cast that you'll see in this dungeon that a lot of the casters do. If the cast goes off, it'll apply a healing taken debuff on the tank. It means it'll absorb healing and a healing absorption on the tank. Currently, it's tuned really highly, and if one cast goes off, it's pretty much half or almost entirely the tank's health pool in healing as an absorb shield. So ideally interrupt this. It's also going to cast Wrath of Zolramus, which is going to do a bunch of AoE damage. Not much you can do there, just kind of tank through it. You're also going to notice in this dungeon, I am trying out the Night Fae Windwalker Monk ability. This ability is bugged right now on the beta, where it cannot deal damage to the same target more than 1 time. So if you see my damage being quite low, that's probably why. Additionally, you saw that he's gonna cast Clinging Darkness. It's a magical debuff that you can dispel that does damage. and you just need to dispel it as soon as possible because it is ramping damage over time. Ideally, you just dispel it before it gets too out of hand. You're gonna see these patchwork soldiers. They just kind of like auto attack the tank and then leap on a target, leap away. They're kind of just annoying whatever mobs, just like fodder mobs, not a huge deal. They're also summoned by the Necromancer here, so you just get a lot of AoE pad, more than 6 targets. We're gonna pull some Blight Bags. Now Blight Bags, I'm not entirely sure what these things do. All I know is that you just killed them, they didn't have much health. They may explode on death. I honestly will have to do this dungeon more to figure out what they do, because I'm not entirely sure yet. But the whole point of this of clearing the trash in this first area is we want to clear enough trash so we have enough room to deal with the first boss, Blightbone. We're going to pull some Vanguards here. So, okay, this is the first Harvester we're going to fight. Now, the Harvester has a really important cast interrupt called Drain Fluids. If Drain Fluids goes off, it will stun its current target while he channels it for, I think, for about 5 seconds and do a lot of damage. So you want to interrupt that. Alternatively, you can deal with it like throw bananas and freehold, and you can just gouge the cast after it starts. That would also work. But you don't have to do that because he will stop his cast if you stun him beforehand, if you want to do that as well. Additionally, these Vanguards will cast Meat Shield, which will just, it'll channel on them, and they'll just get a very large absorb shield that you cannot dispel. So ideally you want to interrupt the Meat Shield if you can, so that the mobs die quicker. Otherwise it's going to take a while to kill them, because the Meat Shield can kind of stack up over time, as you can see here. But this is pretty much all the trash that we want to pull before the first boss. And the first boss's main thing is that he's gonna spawn these worm ads, and the worm ads will fixate on people. And if the worm ads bite that person 3 times, they get 3 stacks of a buff, they will explode, applying a 30-second really heavy damage dot to the entire group, which will pretty much result in a wipe. So ideally, you do not want that cast to go off. So if you're fixated by these things, try to CC them as best you can and just kill them before you have to deal with them, because otherwise it can be kind of a mess. But we're going to kill this Gatekeeper to make some more room before we pull this boss. He's also going to very slowly cut off the room, the first boss will, because he's going to cast all his abilities, and when the worms die, they'll leave a pool on the ground that you don't want to stand in. So over time, you're going to run out of space. That's why we want to clear a lot of trash in this first area, so that we have a lot of room to deal with it. Alright, so we're getting into the first boss, Blightbone. The Blightbone isn't too hard, but he can be a little bit unusual. He'll cast Crunch on the tank, which is basically just a tank buster. It does a bunch of damage. And he's going to cast Heaving Wretch. This will just focus a player, and he will turn based on where the player goes. So if you get targeted with this, make sure just to stand still. And there's the worms I was talking about earlier. We're trying to CC it as much as possible and then just kill them. And then here's the cast where Blightbone will cast Fetid Gas, which leaves a void zone on the ground, and then the worms will die and also leave a void zone. And this is kind of like the entire fight. He will just constantly cast Heaving Wretch, spawn more ads, the ads will explode, he'll do Fetid Gas. The whole fight, just prevent the worms from getting the Blood Gorge off, so they don't get the stacks of the buff and explode. Other than that, just try to manage your space in the room effectively, and you should be victorious against Blightbone. Once you're victorious against Blightbone, you will be heading up these stairs into the next part of the dungeon. This trash is mainly just casters, like from earlier, that will just spam cast Necrotic Bolt with some new abilities actually added into it. So the Bone Carver is going to cast a heal that you want to interrupt, I believe, as well. He's also going to cast Bone Flay. Additionally, the Sorcerer is going to cast Shadow Well, which leaves a void zone on the ground. You want to avoid that as much as possible. You can kind of avoid kicking that if you want, because you can just move out of it. I guess the Bone Carver is going to cast the heal. It's the next guy we pull cast the heal. This guy just casts Bone Flay, it looks like. I don't know what Bone Flay does. It's probably a tank mechanic. I don't know. I haven't tanked these dungeons yet. But we're coming up on our first discharged anima. It's in this corner here, past we just passed it near the golem. You can skip all this trash with a shroud if you want, because none of this sees stealth yet, but you can also just go to the side here like we're doing and skip it as well. You're going to see we're running into a skeletal marauder here. The marauder is going to cast Gruesome Cleave, which is a frontal cleave you do not want to stand in. Additionally, he's going to cast this, Guttural Scream. It's a 15-second kick, cooldown timer. It's a big AoE fear, kind of like from Maw of Souls. You want to interrupt it as soon as you can, otherwise everyone will be feared in that circle. So you have these Bone Menders and the Sorcerer. Now the Bone Mender, it has a cast called Bone Mend, which will heal a nearby target. They'll also spam cast Necrotic Bolts. You want to interrupt as many... This pull has a lot of kicks going on with it. You want to interrupt as many Necrotic Bolts as you possibly can, while also making sure that you interrupt Bone Mend and the fear from the Marauder. It can be kind of scary. Now I end up dying there on that pull. Now I make it back. I'm going to show off the power of the Night Fae Soul Shape ability and why it's going to be very strong Mythic Plus. So here we have our Hunter who's going to Fury Strap this close target, and I'm going to Paralysis the far target. But I get in combat, unfortunately, but it's not a huge deal because I have the Night Fae ability, and if you go a certain Soul Bind, when the Soul Shape ends, you get concealed for a few seconds, which means that you basically have Shadow Meld as any race available to you. Now, no one got the Discharge Anima behind us, so I'm going to go back and get it. Everything's CC'd. Because the Discharge Anima, as I said earlier, does a large amount of damage and interrupts targets, which can enable pulls that you wouldn't normally be able to do. Unfortunately, if you die with this, which you're going to see later, I do die with this, you lose the effect. So you see I'm still in combat. The trap is about to break. I'm kind of scared. I activate my Soul Shape. I blink in place. I'm panicking. This is the first dungeon that I've used this in. I get Necrotic Bolted. I use my Diffuse Magic. Oh! And I get concealed. And guess what? I live! Oh, man. Very close. But you see, I have a ginormous healing absorption on myself. And healing through it isn't that good, but we do learn that you can eat with this healing absorption effect applied to you, and you can still heal. So there's that. It also lasts 60 seconds, so you can kind of see why Necrotic Bolt is a big issue for tanks, and making sure that you interrupt it as much as possible. This next pull here is going to be 2 of the Skeletal Marauders from earlier. They both have cleaves, and they both have the fear. You just need to have 2 melee kick cooldowns on each of them, and it should be no problem. And then also watch out for if you're melee, watch out for the Gruesome Cleave, because it's gonna hurt. You're also gonna see some really good Phalanx Stomp gameplay here. Unfortunately, all my Phalanx Stomps that I'm pressing on here are not hitting these targets more than once. Please, Blizzard, fix this bug. I really like the playstyle of this Covenant ability. It actually is quite fun to use, but it currently is undertuned and also is bugged, super bugged. It don't work right. So you won't be seeing me using this very often right now. But after that pull's dead, we're going to move on to this big, larger pull. Now this has a bunch of shuffling corpses in it. These are just like kind of whatever mobs, not a huge deal. They just kind of walk towards the tank and do a lot of melee damage. But other than that, there's not a whole lot going on in this pull. As a DPS, we have 2 Bone Carvers that are just going to attack the tank and apply their Bone Flay ability. I believe that's not a frontal cone, but it looks like it hurts the tank a lot, so I guess kite that if you have to as a tank. And you have this pull before the boss here. Now you can skip this pull if you want. These mobs do not seem stealth, but we decided to pull it. Now for this pull, there's going to be a lot of enemies in it, and you're like, oh, what do we do? Well, you want to interrupt the Frostbolt volleys as much as possible, because that does a lot of damage to the group. Additionally, try to interrupt the Necrotic Bolt for the tank as much as possible, but for DPS, you want to be focusing your damage on the Necromancer in the middle there, because once the Necromancer dies, all the rest of the mobs in the pull will die. So it'd be really good if you have any priority damage, use it on the Necromancer. As you see here, the Necromancer dies, all the other mobs die as well. And then we go up in here, and now you're gonna be, oh wow, what do you pull in this room? Well, fortunately, you don't pull anything in this room because the ally mob in the middle kills all the mobs. And the second boss encounter starts. Now the second boss encounter is Amarth. Now we do an advanced gamer strategy for this boss. We're gonna drag him into the corner for his ability Land of the Dead. So let me preface this boss is just going to spam cast Necrotic Bolt. Now, the Necrotic Bolt is usually on the tank, but sometimes he will cast it on other targets. Additionally, he will give the guy on the dragon will give the Amarth an enrage buff that you can dispel, which makes him attack much faster. But you're going to see right before he casts Land of the Dead, we're going to drag him into that corner there. It's going to cause all of the adds to stack up when they spawn, which allows us to AoE them down. Normally, if you don't do that, the ads will just spawn all over the room and it's hard to group them up, but you can do that little strategy there and it's kind of nice. Additionally, you're going to see he can cast Necrotic Breath. You just move out of the way. He's just going to turn a direction. He's going to do Breath. You just move out of that. And he's going to cast Final Harvest. Now, Final Harvest, if you stand in the AoE, the green AoE, you will die because it does damage. Additionally, for each I believe for each mob that he casts Final Harvest on, he will get a buff, which does pulsing damage to the group for the rest of the fight. You cannot purge this or remove this in any way, and you just have to deal with this mechanic the entire fight. And as you can see, it does a lot of damage to the entire group. So ideally, you want to kill this boss faster. Hopefully they tune this boss a little bit better, because it's really hard to deal with this buff at the moment. It does way too much pulsing damage. Maybe you're supposed to be using the items on the boss. Not really quite sure. That's pretty much the entire boss. He's just going to cast Land of the Dead over and over again, and that's it. But right after you kill the last boss, 45 minutes later, you're gonna these angels, Kyrian guys, are gonna come down, and you're gonna click on them, and they're gonna drag you to the next part of the dungeon. Now, this next part of the dungeon currently on the beta is very buggy and causes a lot of spells to not work. So you're gonna see my Phalanx Stomp doesn't really do much, but it doesn't do much anyway. Additionally, for hunters, like the flare tar trap thing doesn't work. But anyways, I'm digressing. The whole point is this room is very scary to pull, and there's a packs throughout each corner of the room, and you're gonna get a lot of your trash here, because there's a forced amount of trash you're supposed to kill. Now, you saw the Flesh Crafter there. He casted Throw Cleaver. Now, the Throw Cleaver will be he'll cast it on a target, on an enemy, and you want to move behind one of the enemies that you're fighting, because the Cleaver will intercept that enemy and deal a lot of damage to it. So try to aim it at the highest health target if you can. You see we wipe there. The amount of ground effects we have in our group is an incredible amount of ground effects in our group. And you see the run back here is really hard. There's no checkpoints in this dungeon yet, which is pretty rough. But with the lessons learned from the previous wipe, we will succeed once again. You're going to see that there's spare parts patrol right in front of us. These don't really do a whole lot. They kind of just fixate random players and will damage them. But they don't have much health. You kind of just AoE them. As you can see, there's 6 of them. So if you only hit 5 of them, good luck. And then there's also a much scarier patrol which we're going to pull with the Carrion Stitchwork and the Corpse Collector. Corpse Collector is going to cast Gore Splatter. Now, this mob has a lot of the Corpse Collector has a lot of casts going on. You want to interrupt Gore Splatter, because Gore Splatter will apply a disease to the entire group that does a lot of damage. Additionally, he will cast Drain Fluids from earlier, which will stun someone and do a lot of damage. But he kind of just casts, I don't know if he's bugged right now, but he's casting Gore Splatter very often. And we have 3 melee kicks in our group, and we could barely keep up with the cast that he was coming out with. Additionally, this Kyrian Stitchwork's going to cast Tenderize on our tank, which applies a debuff. You do not want to get too many stacks of this debuff, and you'll cast Mutilate. Once you start to get too many stacks of the Tenderize, you want to have your tank kite away as much as possible. Keep in mind that the Stitchwork cannot be CC'd in any way, so make sure you plan out for that. Other than that, there's just like these packs. There's a lot of the same packs on every side of the room, and once you defeat these, it starts a gauntlet, which you have to kill mini bosses to do. You're going to get most of your trash in this room. We're going to get rest of our count in this room, so you're going to get at least 40% of your count in this room. It's quite a lot. But after you kill all the trash in the room, the third boss will spawn 2 mini bosses on each side here, and both of these mobs, when they spawn, will cast Throw Cleaver on somebody, and you want to aim the cleaver at each of the assistants. Hopefully the same person doesn't get targeted with both, like what happened here with us, because at that point it makes it impossible to aim them, and it's kind of lame. Additionally, the separation assistant here will fixate a target. You can feign death this, and or in our case we bopped it. This will cause this mini boss to fixate towards someone and auto attack them. If you don't have a bop or a feign death or anything, you need to run away very fast, because you will die very fast if you don't do that. Additionally, the stitching assistant will cast Drain Fluids, which you need to interrupt once again, and he'll just do Throw Flesh on random members in your party, which does a large chunk of damage. Not much here to deal with other than just, as you can see, just run away. Unfortunately, once again, the same person got targeted with both Throw Cleavers, so we couldn't kill them. This is kind of slower than normally, because ideally 2 different people get targeted with Throw Cleaver, and you can just have the assistants kill each other with the cleavers, which can be pretty nice. But after we kill this guy, it's going to spawn another mini boss, or it's going to start a chain of mini bosses on each corner of the room. So we kill the last assistant here, and now it begins. So you can, if you res fast enough, you can res someone in time before this gauntlet starts, because as soon as this starts, you get immediately put in combat. And we have to deal with Gore Grind, which is going to do Tenderize from earlier, and we have Gore Grind Bits. It's just 4 target cleave. You cannot pull more mobs into this. It's not possible. Additionally, Gore Grind will turn or face a random player's direction or where the player is, and he'll cast that frontal there you saw, Gut Slice, I believe it was called. As a melee DPS, just make sure that you are moving out of Gut Slice so you don't get hit by it, because it will do a lot of damage to you, and I believe it applies a dot, which is just going to be a bad time. Our tank gets hit with 2 Tenderizes and begins to kite before the third one gets applied. There is a if the tank does kite, you can get I believe Tenderize is like the shield bash from a Taldazar, where he'll just tenderize the nearest target. So the tank has to keep a track of the cooldown of this and not to kite right when Tenderize is about to happen. Otherwise, a poor melee DPS will just get obliterated. But we're going to kill Gore Grind here, and I believe it's another mini boss spawns. There's a lot of force trash in this area that you just have to kill. But right after this trash, it's just going to be boss. And this third boss here has a decent mount going on, but isn't too difficult, I would say. It's just it is a unique mechanic. A Rot Spew is going to do the same thing that the previous mini boss did, but instead he's going to cast Spew Disease, which just leaves this big area of puke on the ground. And you can't avoid you can't avoid the initial damage from it, but you should move out of it immediately as soon as you can. But once this guy dies, he's going to summon an ad, but once you pull the ad, it starts the boss. And the whole point of this boss is that you're using the ad. After a set amount of time, the ad will cast a meat hook ability. And you're trying to aim this meat hook ability at where the boss is located, so it hooks the boss down off his platform, which brings him down and allows you to fight him. While the boss is up there, he'll cast a Stitch Needle on someone, which will do a bit of damage and apply an undispellable bleed debuff that will just do damage over time. So you see here, you get targeted with meat hook, you move it over, and he's gonna meat hook the boss down. Now, ideally, you want to hold DPS on this creation a little bit, so that you get a meat hook right as the boss is about to go back up, because he will try to go back up to his platform. But if you keep this creation alive, he will cast meat hook right as the boss is about to go up again, and you can hook him down immediately. But you do not want to have this creation alive too long, because if that happens, then you have 2 creations up plus the boss on the tank, and that is way too much tank damage for to deal with. Additionally, when the boss is down here, he will cast Embalming Fluid at a random player's location, which will just leave a void zone on the ground. Now, unfortunately, we do end up killing the creation a little bit too early, but it is a high key, and we wanted to play it safe. So you see, Mutilate happens on our poor healer because the tank moved out of range. I'm gonna aim my meat hook towards the boss the best I can. I kind of hit a void zone for a second. It's in a long range hook. Oh, hook the boss down. And I'm gonna try to keep alive because this Stitch Needle is murdering me. But from this point on, you just kill the boss. That's pretty much, this is the whole fight. Just dodge Embalming Ichors or whatever they're called, and if you get aimed with meat hook, just aim it at the boss again. It'll hook the boss. It doesn't do any damage to the boss, which is unfortunate, but at least it won't do damage to anyone else. And at this point, it just becomes a tank, a pure DPS race, and a tank thing where eventually you're gonna kill the creation, and then that'll be it. But this is pretty much it for Surgeon Stitchflesh. Now, once Stitchflesh dies, a teleport will appear, and it will bring you to the final boss of the dungeon, Nailthor the Rhymebinder. Now, this boss is quite overtuned currently on the beta. And this is an 18, which is quite a high key, and we are scaled to about heroic eye level, I believe. Heroic raid eye level. But this boss seems impossible at the moment, or at least very difficult with the current scaling. Also, there's a lot of bugs on this platform, so make sure you watch out for that. But this boss will just constantly cast Icy Shard on the tank, And then every so often he'll cast Frozen Binds. Now, if you get targeted with Frozen Binds, it'll root you in place, and then you'll have a ginormous circle around you, and you'll have a magical dispellable buff. Now, if you get dispelled, it will root anyone that's in the circle. But you can spell reflect this. You can also use Blessing of Freedom on it. Additionally, you'll get targeted with Dark Exile. A random DPS player usually will get prioritized, targeted with what just happened, Dark Exile. You will get sent downstairs here into a gauntlet as a melee. You want to dodge all of these circles and make it to the end. At the end, there is an ad, which is channeling on this poor Kyrian. Now, your goal is to kill this ad, and then click on the Kyrian, and he will bring you back up to the fight. You want to interrupt the enfeeble cast that this ad does, otherwise you will lose 50% haste. But one thing you're going to notice is that in my debuffs, I have this debuff. I have 2 debuffs. One is a stacking debuff, and one is one that's ticking down. If you don't kill this ad within that timer that I have, the 10-second timer right now, you die immediately. Additionally, once you leave downstairs, your debuff will start to have a timer, and you see when the timer expires, it will spawn a circle of a death, like frost circle, on the ground, and the circle will be larger based on how many stacks you have. So the faster that you can do the downstairs, the better it is for everyone. Additionally, the boss will cast Comet Storm, which how we dealt with it, we all stacked on the tank and just moved the same direction. You do not want to get hit by Comet Storm because you will die very quickly. I get targeted with Dark Exile again, and I'm going to do the gauntlet once again. But additionally, in terms of what the boss does, the boss will cast a shield on himself that will deal pulsing damage to the group who is up there. This is part of the reason why the boss is overtuned. The shield is quite large, and if you can't break the shield, you will just die to the pulsing damage that it does. One thing that's nice about a Windwalker Monk down at the gauntlet area here is that you can Touch of Death the ad and get full value on it, which will cause the ad to die incredibly quickly, as you will see here momentarily. But unfortunately, this boss, we did not actually end up killing this boss. It was quite difficult in 18, and yeah. But that's Necrotic Wake, essentially. I hope you guys like the video. Let me know what you guys think of the Necrotic Wake. Do you like the item mechanic? Do you like having to use items? The items seem like are going to be a contentious issue amongst the community. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.